My name is Sydney, and for as long as I can remember, I have always been the one people forget about in my family. It wasn't always obvious, but looking back, the signs were there from the beginning. My younger sister, Julie, was like a shining star from the moment she was born. With her golden curls and big smiles, she had our parents wrapped around her little finger. But me? I was the quiet one, more interested in my chemistry set than making friends. I still remember my 11th birthday. I had been hoping for a new microscope and had been dropping hints for weeks. Instead, I got a frilly dress that made me look like a cupcake. But Mom, I hate dresses, I complained. Nonsense. You'll look just like Julie, she said, smiling, not understanding why I was upset. As we got older, the difference between us only grew. Julie moved through school easily, charming everyone with her looks and personality, while I focused on my books and science projects. One night at dinner, Mom excitedly said, "Did you hear? Julie has been nominated for prom queen." "That's great," I said, trying to sound happy. "I won first place in the science fair today." "Oh, that's nice, dear," Dad said, barely paying attention. Then he turned back to Julie. "So, princess, have you picked out your dress yet?" And that's how it always was. No matter how big my achievements were, they never seemed to matter as much as Julie's latest success, even if it was something small. My senior year, I worked for months on a project about sustainable biofuels for the state science fair. When they announced the winners, I couldn't believe it. First place goes to Sydney Jake. I was overjoyed. Finally, this was something my parents couldn't ignore, or at least that's what I thought. "That's great, honey," Mom said when I told her. But then she added, "We can't come to the award ceremony. Julie has a dance recital that day, and you know how important that is to her." And just like that, my big moment was forgotten. I watched as they fussed over Julie's costume and makeup while my trophy sat on a shelf, gathering dust. It was a hard truth to accept, but I was getting used to it. When college acceptance letters started arriving, I could barely hold in my excitement. A full scholarship to a top university, it was more than I ever hoped for.
Mom, Dad.
I got in. I ran into the living room, waving the letter. A full scholarship and everything. Mom looked up from her magazine. "That's nice, dear. Julie, didn't you say you needed help picking a prom dress?" Just like that, my big moment was ignored again. "But it's a full scholarship," I said again, my voice quieter this time. Dad patted my shoulder, without much thought. "Good job, kiddo. Julie, princess, let's go shopping. You can't show up to prom in just anything, right?" I watched as they all piled into the car, my acceptance letter crumpled in my hand. I was used to this feeling, but it still hurt. Even though my family didn't make a big deal about it, I packed my bags and left for college, with high hopes. For the first time, I was free from Julie's shadow, free to just be me. College was a fresh start. Suddenly, my love for science wasn't weird or boring. It was respected and even admired. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make the most of this opportunity. Meanwhile, Julie followed the path our parents had always imagined for her. She went to a local community college, more interested in parties than classes. "College is so hard," she whined during one of our rare phone calls. "I don't know how you do it, Sydney." I wanted to tell her that maybe if she spent less time partying and more time studying, she'd find it easier. But instead, I just gave her some vague encouragement and changed the subject. Then, in my second year, Julie dropped a big surprise. "I'm engaged," she squealed over the phone. "Paul proposed last night. Isn't it romantic?" Paul, her high school boyfriend. The same guy who once asked me if science was like really hard and stuff. "That's great, Julie," I said, forcing some excitement into my voice. "Have you set a date?" "We're thinking right after graduation," she gushed. "Oh, Sydney, it's going to be perfect. You'll be my maid of honor, won't you?" The wedding was exactly what you'd expect. Julie looked stunning, Paul looked uncomfortable in his tux, and I stood there in a frilly pink dress, smiling for the pictures. "Isn't this perfect?" Mom whispered to me during the reception. This is what every mother dreams of for her daughter. I wanted to ask if she had ever dreamed of anything for me, but I kept quiet. This was Julie's day, after all. I focused on my studies and later on my career, while Julie's life played out exactly how her parents had always dreamed. Within a year of her wedding, she had big news. "I'm going to be a grandmother." Mom squealed over the phone. "Oh, Sydney, isn't it wonderful?" I murmured a polite congratulations, already expecting the question that always followed. "When are you going to settle down, Sydney? When will you give us grandchildren?" 10 months later, Erica was born, a tiny bundle wrapped in pink, crying loudly. I flew home for the weekend, playing the role of the loving aunt while ignoring the not-so-subtle hints from my parents. "You know, Sydney," Dad said while bouncing Erica on his knee, "you're not getting any younger. Don't you want this for yourself?" I clenched my teeth and forced a smile. "I'm focused on my career right now, Dad." Mom shook her head. "Careers are fine, dear, but family is what really matters." I wanted to remind her that they had never cared much about my career before. But instead, I just smiled and changed the subject. 3 years later, Julie had another baby, Nick. Once again, I played the devoted aunt, all while dodging more questions about why I didn't have a family of my own. Meanwhile, I was making real progress in my career as a biotechnologist. The long hours and hard work paid off, and by the time I turned 31, I had been promoted to senior researcher. When I told my parents, their response was a distracted, "That's nice, dear," as they cooed over new pictures of Erica and Nick. Around this time, I decided to buy a house. While my coworkers spent money on fancy cars and vacations, I had been saving carefully. When I finally found the perfect place, a beautiful 2-bedroom house in a great neighborhood, I was beyond excited. "Mom, Dad, I bought a house," I announced during our next phone call. There was a long pause. "A house," Mom repeated. "By yourself?" "Yes, by myself," I said, my excitement fading a little. "It's a great investment but it's such a big house for one person," Mom interrupted. "What will you do with all that space?" I sighed. "I'll enjoy it, Mom. It's mine." "Well," she said, clearly unimpressed, "I suppose if that's what you want."
Oh.
"Did I tell you Erica lost her first tooth yesterday?" And just like that, the conversation shifted back to Julie and her kids. The months after I bought my house were busy with work and getting settled. I spent my free time decorating, making each room feel like home. During this time, I started noticing a change in my family. My parents didn't call as often, and when they did, something felt off in their voices. One evening, Mom called me. "Sydney, dear," she said in an overly sweet tone. "We're having a family dinner next week. You'll come, won't you? We need to talk." I agreed, but I had a bad feeling. In my family, "we need to talk" usually meant trouble. On the night of the dinner, I pulled into my parents' driveway, feeling uneasy. Julie's car was already there, and I could hear Erica and Nick laughing inside. Dinner was tense. My parents kept exchanging looks. Julie was unusually quiet, and her husband, Paul, kept clearing his throat like he wanted to say something but didn't. Finally, as we finished dessert, Dad cleared his throat. "Sydney, we need to talk about something important." Here comes, I thought. "What's up, Dad?" He glanced at Mom, who nodded as if encouraging him to continue. "Well, you see, sweetie, we've been thinking, that big house of yours, it's really too much space for just one person." I felt my stomach tighten. "Dad, we've talked about this. I love my house. It's mine." "Yes, but," he hesitated, looking uncomfortable. Mom took over. "What your father is trying to say is that Julie and her family need more space. The kids are growing, and their apartment is getting too small." I turned to Julie, who was suddenly very focused on her plate. "Okay."
And
Mom's voice became even sweeter. "And since you're single and don't have children, we think you should give your house to Julie and her family. Just hand them the keys and move out." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I looked around, waiting for someone to laugh and say it was all a joke. But no one did. They were all waiting for my answer. "You can't be serious," I finally said. "Now, Sydney," Mom said, her tone changing to one she used when I was being difficult. "Don't be selfish. Julie needs the space more than you do." "Selfish," I repeated, my voice rising. How is it selfish to keep the house I worked hard for and paid for? It's your duty as a sister to help in times of need, Dad added. I turned to Julie, who was still avoiding my eyes. And what do you have to say about this? She shrugged and finally looked at me. Well, it would be nice to have more space for the kids. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own family was asking me to give up my home, acting like I was the unreasonable one for refusing. No, I said firmly, standing up. Absolutely not. I'm not giving up my house. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. As I walked out, my father called after me. Think about it, Sydney. Family should come first. The days after that awful family dinner felt like a blur of shock and anger. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, unable to believe they had the nerve to ask me for something so outrageous. My phone kept buzzing with calls and messages from my parents and Julie, but I ignored them all. On the third day, as I was trying to focus on work, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Thinking it wasn't my family, I answered. Hello, is this Sydney? A woman's voice spoke, sounding disapproving. Yes, who's this? This is your Aunt Kate. I can't believe what I'm hearing about you, young lady. Your poor sister needs a home for her children, and you are living all alone in that big house? Shame on you. I felt my blood pressure rise. Aunt Kate, that's not. In my day, she continued, cutting me off, family helped family. We didn't hoard our resources like selfish misers. I'm not hoarding anything, I snapped. It's my house. I bought it with my money. Well, she huffed, if you're not going to use all that space, you should at least think about donating your eggs. It's not like you need them anyway. I almost dropped the phone. Excuse me? You heard me, she said matter-of-factly. You're not getting any younger, you know. Tick-tock. I hung up without another word, my hands shaking with anger.
How dare she?
How dare any of them? But it didn't stop there. Over the next few days, my phone was flooded with calls and messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Each one had something to say about my house or my life choices. My great-aunt Anna left a voicemail. Sydney, dear, it's your great-aunt Anna. I just wanted to say, it's not too late to find a nice man and settle down. Then you'd need that big house. It was never-ending. Every time my phone buzzed, it was another guilt trip, another opinion I didn't ask for. I started dreading checking my phone, wincing every time it lit up. To escape, I threw myself into work, staying late at the lab just so I wouldn't have to go home to more messages. Then, one of those late nights, I got sick. Nothing serious, just a bad cold, but bad enough that my boss insisted I take a few days off to rest. So, there I was curled up on my couch with a box of tissues, feeling miserable, both physically and emotionally. My phone had finally been quiet for a few hours, and I was just starting to relax. Then I heard it. A noise at my front door. It sounded like someone was messing with the lock. My heart started racing. Was someone trying to break in? I got up as quietly as I could and crept toward the door. Peeking through the window, I saw figures on my porch. Familiar figures. I yanked the door open, making the people outside jump in surprise. What the hell are you doing? Standing there, caught red-handed, were my parents and Julie. They looked frozen, like deer in headlights, staring at me as if they had been caught doing something they knew was wrong. Mom was the first to recover. Sydney, dear, we were just worried about you. You haven't been answering your phone. So, you decided to break into my house? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad at least had the sense to look embarrassed. We didn't think you'd be home. We thought you'd be at work. And that makes it okay? I was practically shouting now. What were you planning to do? Move Julie in while I was gone? Julie, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. Sydney, you're being dramatic. We were just going to wait for you to come home. Then, for the first time, I noticed the car parked behind them. It was loaded with boxes and furniture. My blood ran cold. You are going to move in, I said, my voice flat. You are actually going to move into my house without my permission. Mom sighed, her voice turning into that patronizing tone I had heard all my life. Sydney, we've talked about this. Julie needs the space more than you do. We thought if we just took the initiative. You thought wrong. I cut her off. This is my house. Mine. I bought it with my own money. Money I earned through hard work. You have no right to it. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. My neighbors, the Jakes, were peering through their window, clearly concerned. Mr. Jake caught my eye and held up his phone, mouthing, "Police?" I nodded. Turning back to my family, I said, "I've called the police. You need to leave."
Now.
Dad scoffed. "You wouldn't. Your own family?" As if on cue, the sound of sirens filled the air. My family's faces turned pale. The police car pulled up and 3 officers stepped out. One of them looked at the scene with suspicion. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "Yes, officer. These people were trying to break into my house." Mom gasped. "Sydney, how could you?" The officers turned to my family. "Is this true?" Dad started stammering, trying to explain, but the officer raised a hand to stop him. "Sir, trying to enter someone's home without permission is a serious offense. I'm going to have to ask you all to leave immediately." I stood in the doorway, shaking, as the officers escorted them off my property. As they walked away, Julie turned and called over her shoulder, "You'll regret this, Sydney. You'll end up old and alone." I slammed the door shut and slid down onto the floor, leaning against it. Tears spilled down my face, a mix of anger, hurt, and relief. Then everything went silent. No more phone calls. No more guilt-tripping messages. It was like I had been completely cut off from the family. A part of me felt relieved, but another part ached. As broken as it was, they were still my family. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message. It was from Aunt Sophie, Mom's sister. We hadn't spoken in years, not since she and Mom had a falling out over some old family drama. "Meet me tomorrow at Café Blue at 5 p.m. Curious and desperate for even one ally, I agreed. The next day, I sat across from Aunt Sophie in a cozy corner of Café Blue. She looked older than I remembered, but her eyes were still sharp and kind. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Sydney, I'm so sorry for everything you've been through," she said. "Your mother called me, trying to get me on her side. But there's more to this story than you know. That's why I wanted to meet you." I leaned in, my curiosity growing. "What do you mean?" Aunt Sophie sighed. "Your parents and Julie, they're in serious financial trouble." I frowned.
What? How?
She gave me a sad look. Julie and Paul have been living beyond their means for years. Expensive cars, designer clothes, fancy vacations, all bought with credit. I shook my head in disbelief. But why? How did it get this bad? "It's worse than that," Aunt Sophie continued. "Paul has a gambling problem. A serious one. He's been secretly draining their accounts for years." Everything started to make sense. The desperate attempt to take my house, the constant pressure from my parents. I swallowed hard. What about Mom and Dad? Aunt Sophie's face turned grim. They lost a huge amount of money in a pyramid scheme a few years ago. They've been struggling ever since. Their plan was to move in with Julie and Paul as soon as they got your house. I sat back, shocked. "How do you know all this?" I asked. Aunt Sophie sighed. "I work at the bank where they all have accounts," she explained. "I noticed some strange activity and started looking into it. When I confronted your mother about it, she cut me out of the family." My head was spinning. All this time, while I had been working hard and saving, my family had been digging themselves into a hole. And when things got bad, they tried to drag me down with them. "Sydney," Aunt Sophie said gently, "I know this is a lot to take in, but I think it's time we do something about this. If you're willing, I have an idea." The investigation begins. Armed with everything Aunt Sophie had told me, we decided to dig deeper. We hired a private investigator, a tough and no-nonsense woman named Chris. She came highly recommended. For weeks, we waited anxiously as Chris did her work. Finally, she called us in for a meeting. What she revealed left us speechless. The shocking truth. Paul, Julie's husband, had been living the double life. He was having an affair with none other than my cousin Michelle, Uncle Jacob's daughter. He's been secretly sending her money for months, Chris explained, laying out bank statements and hotel receipts. Expensive gifts, weekend getaways, you name it. I felt sick. But where did he get the money? I asked, though deep down I already knew the answer. Chris's face turned serious. From his gambling wins, and from your parents. Aunt Sophie and I exchanged stunned glances. The betrayal ran deeper than we ever imagined. The family gathering. We decided to hold a family gathering at my house. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same house they had tried to steal from me would now be the place where everything fell apart. On the day of the gathering, I watched as my family arrived, their faces full of curiosity and smugness. They probably thought I had finally given in to their demands. Once everyone was seated, I stood up. My heart was pounding, but I was ready. I called you all here today because there are some things you need to know. I began. Then I laid everything out. The financial troubles, the gambling addiction, the affair. With each revelation, I watched their faces drain of color. Julie jumped up, tears running down her face. It's not true, she screamed, before collapsing into sobs. Paul, tell them it's not true. But Paul was already halfway to the door. Uncle Jacob, his face twisted in anger, grabbed him by the collar. You son of a, he growled. That's my daughter you've been messing around with. The fallout. My parents sat frozen in shock. Not because of what they had done, but because their financial ruin was now exposed. The same relatives who had judged me so harshly suddenly changed their tune. We had no idea, Aunt Kate muttered. Sydney, we're so sorry, someone else whispered. As chaos unfolded around me, for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I felt strangely calm. The truth was finally out. All the lies and manipulations had been exposed. In the weeks that followed, our family was completely turned upside down. Julie, unable to forgive Paul for cheating, filed for divorce. With nowhere else to go, she and the kids moved back in with our parents. But that didn't last long. The bank foreclosed on their house, forcing them to move into a small rented apartment. 6 people crammed into a space smaller than my living room. Letting go. I watched everything unfold from a distance. After many sleepless nights and lots of soul-searching, I made the difficult decision to cut ties with my family. You're doing the right thing, Sydney, Aunt Sophie told me over coffee one afternoon. It's not easy, but it's necessary for your mental health and happiness. Aunt Sophie had become my rock. She was the family I chose when my own had let me down. Our weekly coffee dates became the best part of my new life. A new chapter. As the weeks turned into months, I finally settled into a new routine. Without my family's constant drama and demands, I had time to focus on myself. But with that came a surprising realization. I was lonely. You know, Aunt Sophie said one day, there's a whole world out there beyond work and home. Why don't you try something new? With her encouragement, I joined a local rock climbing group. It was way out of my comfort zone, but as I strapped on the harness for the first time, I felt a thrill of excitement I hadn't felt in years. That's where I met Mark. He was helping another climber, his strong hands skillfully handling the rope. When he turned and gave me a warm smile, my heart skipped a beat. First time? He asked, noticing how nervously I was fidgeting with the gear. Is it that obvious? I laughed. We started talking, and I was immediately drawn to his kind eyes and easygoing nature. As we chatted, I learned he was a wildlife photographer with a passion for capturing nature's beauty. For the first time in years, I felt truly happy. I felt a spark of excitement at the idea of a real relationship. Mark was kind, adventurous, and most importantly, he understood complicated family situations in a way few people did. We started dating, and our shared love for nature and understanding of family struggles brought us even closer. Before I knew it, we were talking about marriage, something I had once thought was impossible for me. A new kind of family. Through it all, Aunt Sophie remained my biggest supporter. She became the mother figure I had always wished for, but never had. One day, she sat me down, her eyes filled with emotion. Sydney, she said softly, I want you to know something. I've changed my will. I'm leaving everything to you. I hugged her, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't believe how much my life had changed. The path hadn't been easy, but it had led me to where I was meant to be. With Aunt Sophie's love, Mark's support, and a strength I never knew I had, I was finally ready to face whatever the future held.